Hello and welcome to Seymour Sports Corner. I'm your host, David Seymour. For those of you just joining me, I am an aspiring sports broadcaster. I'm currently enrolled in school trying to get my bachelor's degree in sportscasting. And I'm just trying to kind of get my foot in the door and get my feel around being on a microphone and in front of a camera. So I really appreciate you guys joining me, and I hope you enjoy the show. We've got a lot to get into today. I'm going to start with apologizing that I didn't get an episode out last week. The software that I'm using to run this podcast keeps cutting out the middle of my recordings, and I just couldn't deal with it last week. And so I'm currently in the middle of trying to find new software to do that with. That being said, we're going to dive in because in the last 2 weeks, we've had a lot happen. We had a new contract in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor signed a contract that made him like the fourth or fifth highest paid running back in the NFL. After a long bout, off-season battle with the ownership and the general manager there in Indianapolis, he had come out and said that he wanted to retire as an Indianapolis Colt, but he wanted a new contract, felt like he had played himself into a new contract. And I can say that I personally agree with that. But Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, had come out and said that by no means were they even going to think about re-signing Jonathan Taylor. And there was this whole back and forth of he's leaving the facility to rehab on his own. He's leaving training camp for personal reasons. He demanded a trade. There were a lot of teams that were very interested in trading for him. But the Colts made the price tag incredibly high, something that no team was going to be willing to pay. It'll be interesting to see, though, how this contract affects the running back market going forward, right? When I was growing up, running back was one of the most important positions on the field. I grew up watching the greats like Barry Sanders, and as much as I hate the Cowboys, you had Emmitt Smith and Terrell Davis and Jamal Lewis and Jamal Anderson and just Jerome Bennis, guys that just toted the rock. Even in the later years of high school and my early 20s, you had guys like Clinton Portis and Warrick Dunn and Mike Allstott, and the list goes on and on of just great running backs that were the centerpiece and the focal point of the offense. And as the NFL's rules have made it easier for offenses to operate, right, with the roughing the passer penalties and the pass interference penalties, defenseless player penalties, we've kind of gone away from the running back. It's about spreading the field and getting the ball down the field, because it's either going to be a big completion, an interception that's the same as a punt, or it's going to be a penalty that's going to put you down at the other end of the field anyway. So the focus on the running back has gone away, right? We still have a few great ones out there, but they're not the focal point of most offenses. There's a few offenses, the Tennessee Titans, without Derrick Henry, they have nothing. But so it'll be interesting. We had this big off-season battle of the running backs, right? Austin Eckler forms this Zoom conference with all the running backs about how they can change the running back market, and there's really nothing they can do till the CBA's over, right? The franchise tag is what's really ruined the running backs pay scale for all intents and purposes, right? You get a running back on his rookie deal, so you get him for 4 years. If he's a first rounder, you get him for 5 years because you get the 5th year option. After that, you get the franchising tag franchise tag him twice. And so essentially 6 to 7 years of his career are spent playing for you at bottom of the barrel money. Whether that's fair or not is depends on what side of the line you fall on it, right? But you had Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs were the two big guys that were holding out this year that were franchise tag. And they both ended up coming back on 1-year deals. So the deal with the franchise tag is they can't sign a long-term deal after July 17th or whatever it is. And so they couldn't sign a long-term deal, but they could renegotiate a 1-year deal that was better than what the franchise tag was. And both of them were able to do that. The one thing about it, though, is both of their contracts were super incentive-laden, meaning they had to have a certain number of carries to hit this number and a certain number of rushing yards to hit this number and a certain amount of receiving yards to hit this number. So they really stair-step their contracts with incentives. Now, Josh Jacobs probably hits his if he stays healthy. He's been the focal point of the Raiders' offense all season long, and he's playing very well. Saquon, on the other hand, is going to have a hard time hitting the number that he agreed to because he's not even playing. I think he's about to miss the third week in a row with a high ankle injury, which was, if you remember, the reason why the Giants were so intent on franchising him to begin with, right? Last year was the first year that he was completely healthy and played every game in the season. And here we are back, and he's injured again. So it's, it's 6 one way, half a dozen the other on which way this should go. But it will be interesting moving forward to see how the running backs do this coming off season after the deal that Jonathan Taylor just got. Because I could say a lot for what the future of the running back market is. Another thing that really affects the running back market is you've got a guy like the running back out in Miami that just recently went on injured reserve with a knee injury. Achane, or I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his name. I know there was a way everybody was pronouncing it, and he corrected everybody, so I don't really want to butcher it too much. But he's an example of what's changed in the running back market, right? No longer do you need a first or second round running back to do damage. This guy was a 5th or 6th round pick, and he's come in and just lit the league up. He's fast. He's a one-cut runner, and he's gone. And that's kind of been the knock on the running backs is I don't need somebody that's expensive. I can go get anybody to replace you. Right? If my scheme's right, my blocking's right, anybody can run behind it. And it's starting to be proven time and time again. So like I said, it'll be really interesting to see where this Jonathan Taylor deal takes the running back market going forward. So we're a little over a quarter of the way through the NFL season. We're about halfway through the college football season. So I just want to hit on a few things that I feel like we've learned through this short time that football season's been going on. And truth be told, it's not very far from being over. So in college football, I think we learned that the Colorado Buffaloes are for real. All right. They lost two games, a blowout loss to Oregon, who was just miles better than them. And then they are getting blown out by USC, and they come back and almost tie that game. Probably the worst onside kick I've ever seen in my life. Which onside kicks are hard to begin with, so it's not that much of a detriment. But Feely, their kicker, is the son of an ex-NFL kicker, so I kind of expected a little bit more, but it is what it is. It's probably the hardest kick in the world is the onside kick. So not too much blame there. With that being said, they come back and almost win that game, and then they go in and get a victory to get themselves to 4 wins. They're 2 wins away from being bowl eligible. They got Stanford this week, which should be a win. So now they just got to find one more win somewhere in the season to become bowl eligible. And I really think that they win probably another 2, 3, maybe even 4 games. I could see him winning as many as 8 games this season, but what Deion's doing over there is for real. Be exciting to see Travis Hunter come back. They say that there's a good chance that he comes back Friday to play against Stanford, so it'll be fun to watch him play again. USC has no shot. As exciting as that offense is and as good as Caleb Williams is, that defense is atrocious, and they're going to lose 2 or 3 games at some point in this season. If they have to play Oregon or Washington or anybody like that, they're dead in the water. That defense is going to let them down every time. Texas, as disappointing as that loss was Saturday to Oklahoma, I still think that Texas has a window to get into the college football playoff, and if they do that, they make some noise. Oklahoma's Dylan Gabriel is for real. That kid can ball. I remember he was balling over at UCF, but to see him do what he did to a Texas defense that hasn't had that done to him all season long, no matter who they were playing, was a sight to see. As a Texas fan, my hat's off to Oklahoma. They came in with a great game plan, hit us in the mouth early, and they kept it moving. Texas got the late comeback, and it had the lead late, right? You got 1 minute and 17 seconds left, and all you have to do is make one stop. And they had ample opportunity to do that. A couple of really bad penalties on that drive kept it alive for Oklahoma. They had a chance a couple of times to get off the field and just couldn't. So my hope is that we get to play Oklahoma in the So I'm in Georgia. I've been clamoring all year that Georgia's not that tough, that the SEC's dead, and I still believe that the SEC is dead. Had I been able to operate my show last week, it would have gone something like, I guarantee Kentucky covers, and they may even beat Georgia. I watched the first half of that game, and I changed the channel because it was an absolute clinic put on by Georgia. And I think they knew the whole country was watching. They had struggled just the week before and against a way inferior opponent, and almost lost that game. And I think in their eyes, they knew that the whole country was watching and waiting to see them struggle or even lose. And Carson Beck, shout out to a Jayville kid, Mandarin High. He put on an absolute clinic. That whole Georgia team did. They played defense better than they've played defense all season. I think they ran the ball better than they've ran the ball all season. Bowers is by far heads and tails the best tight end in the country, and should very well be on the Heisman watch. That kid is something special. So that being said, I don't know that Georgia's the number one team in the country. Last week I was gonna talk about how Texas deserved to be the number one team in the country, and up until last week when they got beat by Oklahoma, I firmly believed that they were the number one team in the country. I still believe that they could be the number one team in the country when the season's over and done with. But currently Georgia is number one, and they showed why last week. Now they've got one of the easiest schedules in all of college football this year. So going forward, I don't see them losing a game. They're going to go into the SEC championship undefeated. They're going to play an Alabama or an Ole Miss or a Missouri. No, I think Missouri's in the East. Somehow, some way, with the weird setup with all the new incoming teams, somehow Missouri's in the East. But that's neither here nor there. I don't expect them to lose the SEC championship. They're going to go to the college football playoff. I don't know that they win a championship this year, though. I think that there's a couple of teams out there that are just better than what Georgia is. Now, beautiful thing about football is the best team doesn't always win. It's who plays best that night. And so the one thing Georgia has going for them is that they're a championship caliber team, right? They've been there. All of those players that are on that team have either already played in a championship or they were sitting on the bench seeing how a championship's won. And that goes a long way, right? We talk about culture all the time. Some teams just have natural losing cultures, and it seems like they can never get over the hump. And some teams have winning cultures, right? And Georgia's one of those teams that just has a winning culture, especially since Kirby Smart's gotten there. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to three-peat or not. So we'll move on to the NFL. The other thing I was going to say about college football, right? I know the Pac-12's dead after this year, but man, how many quarterbacks have gone over to the Pac-12 and resurrected their careers that were dead? Michael Penix Jr. over at Washington is lighting it up. Bo Nix, who I've always known as a choke artist, has gone over to Oregon and completely changed any outlook that anybody had on him while he was at Auburn. He's completely changed the narrative over there. Who's the other one? Oh, that's right. DJ, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. I haven't had the practice for that. But he looks legit over there at Oregon State. It's, Caleb Williams was at Oklahoma and he was a star there. Let's not get it twisted. But he goes over to USC and lights it up and wins a Heisman in his first year. And I think that's Shedeur Sanders, right? Pac-12 quarterback coming from Jackson State. Can he do it with the big boys? And other than that Oregon game, he's completely lit it up. So it's sad to see that the Pac-12 is going to leave, because this is where these quarterbacks have all gone to resurrect their careers, or to change a narrative. Shedeur changes the narrative of he can only do it at a small school to he can do it anywhere, and looks like a legit top 5 pick in the draft. Bo Nix looks like a legit first rounder. Michael Penix looks like a legit top 10 pick. And these are all guys that you had written off while they were at their old schools. Shedeur probably doesn't even get a real look at an NFL team. Maybe a few because he is Deion's son, but doesn't get a legit look the way he's going to get a legit look now. So hats off to the Pac-12's final year. The goodbye tour seems to be going off without a hitch, man. All these quarterbacks look great, and it's been absolutely fun to watch. So let's move on to the NFL and some of the things that we've learned or that we've seen, or some thoughts based on being a quarter of the way through the season. I'll start with the Detroit Lions. They're for real. They're gonna win the NFC North, and I don't know if they make it to a Super Bowl, just because San Francisco is going to be in their way. San Francisco is going to be in everybody's way. But the Detroit Lions are for real. What they've built over there through the draft, through free agency, the culture that Dan Campbell's built. We just talked about culture, right? How some teams always have a losing culture and they can't seem to get over the hump. Well, that was the Detroit Lions. And my entire life, the Detroit Lions have just been bad. I can't even say that I've ever seen the Detroit Lions win a playoff game. And I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that they've been in the playoffs since the day I was born. So it's a team that's just known to be a losing franchise, right? You don't go there expecting to win. And Dan Campbell's changed all that, right? He brought in this culture, this aggressive, we're not gonna take no crap from nobody. You're gonna give us what we deserve because we deserve respect. You know, he's brought that air of we're no longer the doormat, and the team's bought in, right? And in doing so, you've seen them. You know, at the end of last year, they go on a 7-game winning streak, almost make the playoffs, and it left them wanting, right? It left them wanting more, and they come into this season wanting more. And so I think they win this division running away. Not that it's going to be hard. It's a bad division. The Bears, we'll get to that in a minute, but the Bears are absolutely horrible. Green Bay's still trying to figure things out with their new young quarterback. And not that they're a bad team, but it takes a little while for a guy to come in and get used to the ropes, right? And Minnesota's a bad football team, and they're going to be even worse with Justin Jefferson on an IR. So Detroit wins this division running away. I mean, I think they're already 3 games up on Green Bay this early in the season, and barring anything major happening, you know, that's a lot of ground to make up, especially if Detroit keeps winning, you know. So I think that we could be seeing a 49ers-Lions NFC Championship game, which would be absolutely interesting and intriguing and fun, knowing the history of that franchise to see them to get there, you know. My dad's from up north, so I knew a lot about the Browns and the Lions and their history and things like that, because those were the teams that were local to him, you know. And my love for football came from being around him. So knowing these histories, right, it kind of means something to me to see something like this happen, to see a team that I've seen be just a complete dumpster fire my entire life build something, right? This isn't just like one magical year where we went out and signed a bunch of players and went all in for a championship and here it is, and now we're going to dismantle the whole thing. No, they've built this through the draft and through changing the culture and bringing in the right people on the coaching staff and the right backups to support these players and the right medical staff and the right workout staff, right? They've groomed this thing, and now we're getting to watch it come to fruition. So another thing is that Brock Purdy is a legit quarterback, right? We are just talking about that I thought the 49ers were going to be in the NFC Championship game against the Lions. Brock Purdy's the real deal. Mr. Irrelevant comes in, and this is the perfect storm for him, so to speak, right? The biggest question coming in was, how's the elbow going to hold up? And the second biggest question was, is this kid for real, right? We saw him come out off the bench based on injuries and rattle off a bunch of wins in a row and get to the NFC Championship game, which is where he got hurt. And it became, well, now that teams have tape on him, is he going to be able to sustain that success in his second year? And it's a definitive yes so far, right? They're 5-0. They're steamrolling just about everybody they play. And he's operating that offense like he's been doing it his entire life. Probably going to upset some people here with this, but I feel like, and not to the extent that it was in New England, right? I think that's an anomaly, right? We're not ever going to see a coach and a quarterback win 6 Super Bowls together. It just doesn't happen like that. But the similarities between the old New England Patriots and the new San Francisco 49ers, their paths cross in too many different places. Right? You had a young Bill Belichick come into the Patriots, heralded as the best defensive mind in all of the NFL. In his second year as a head coach, he drafts in the 6th round Tom Brady, who's never supposed to play an actual down of football. He's a career backup, right? Hell, he couldn't even win the starting job at Michigan when he was there, right? Drew Bledsoe goes down, kid steps in, and voila, they're in the playoffs and on their way to a Super Bowl where, as a second-year quarterback, he wins the Super Bowl. So fast forward 20-some-odd years, right? Kyle Shanahan becomes the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, heralded as probably the top offensive mind in all of the NFL, right? Now, it's not his second year of coaching, probably more like his 4th or 5th year of being the head coach. But still, 7th round, last pick of the draft, Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy comes in. In his rookie year, not his second year, in his rookie year, he comes in because of 2 injuries to the quarterbacks in front of him and takes his team to the NFC Championship game where he gets hurt. Does he not get hurt? Maybe they make it to the Super Bowl. But here we are in Brock Purdy's second year. By the way, the kid has not lost a single start that he started and finished the game. Not one time. He's undefeated as a starter in the NFL, minus the game that he went out injured. So, like I said, I don't know that we see this quarterback and coach combo rattle off 6 Super Bowls. But I could see them winning a couple of them, right? And the nuances in the way these paths cross, we could very well be looking at the next Belichick Brady. Obviously not to that extent. That's hard to match. So speaking of the Patriots and Belichick, they're a bad team, man. They are a bad roster. I don't think Mac Jones is as bad as he is playing, but he has nobody to throw the ball to. He has no running game to speak of. And I don't wonder if the games pass Bill Belichick by, right? When Belichick came in as a head coach and we were watching him do all of these things with players that other teams had cut and players that were coming out of the 5th and 6th round. And, it was something we had never seen before. And we crowned this guy the king of being able to get the best out of every player that he ever played or ever coached, right? He could get the best out. But as time's gone on, right, we're 20 years or more from the time that he took over the New England Patriots. What did he take over, 2001 or 2002? So we're looking, we're 22 years that he's been coaching these guys, right? The players that are coming in are different. than the players that he coached. The rules that we play with now are 1,000 times different than what he came in doing, right? So we're looking at a completely different game than the one that he started at, right? And the players that are coming out are different, right? They don't want to be talked to the same way. They expect you to conform to what it is that they want to do. They're not coming in with this business first attitude, right? They're here to get paid. And I just think that the game's passing by. The way the game's set up now is you need speed and you need talent, and he doesn't have either of those on either side of the ball. And I don't know that Robert Kraft fires him in the middle of the season. I don't think Robert Kraft would do that to Bill Belichick, embarrass him in that way. But I could see a very similar situation to when Don Shula left the Miami Dolphins, right? We're going to make it seem like it's your idea, make you okay with leaving, but it's time for you to go. I'm not going to fire you, but I am forcing you to resign on your own terms because what we have going on here isn't going to work for me anymore. You know, Robert Kraft's a guy that, since he's on the team, they've won 6 Super Bowls, right? That's the expectation that he has, is that he's going to be playing for a Super Bowl every year. And he knows, looking at the team that he has, that he's nowhere close to playing for a Super Bowl. So I find it very hard to believe that, barring some kind of major transformation towards the end of the year, that Bill Belichick is the coach of the New England Patriots next year. Buffalo has to get some defensive players on the field quickly. In consecutive weeks, they've lost multiple star defensive players, and it's hard to play in this league if you don't have stars on both sides of the ball, right? And Buffalo's defense is depleted, and so if they have any hopes of making a Super Bowl run, they're going to have to figure that out. And they're going to have to figure that out quick. I saw something where they'd signed Josh Norman, but Josh Norman hasn't been good in 5 or 6 years. I don't even know if he played football at all last year. So that's just kind of a quick fix Band-Aid, but they're probably going to have to start restructuring contracts to make some money available so that they can go get somebody. Because with Milano and Tre'Davious White out, they're hurting. You know, they lost a close game against Jacksonville, where Jacksonville spent all week in London, and they showed up on Friday. I kind of saw that coming. But regardless, they need to get some help on that defense. I'm going to keep reiterating this question is Baltimore regretting, or when does Baltimore regret giving Lamar Jackson all that money? Their offense looks pathetic. I know they haven't had Odell Beckham for the last couple of weeks, but Zay Flowers is legit. He looks good. And I really just think it's Lamar's inability to operate in an offense where he's a thrower of the football. You can say all you want about Greg Roman and the offensive scheme that he ran, but he ran the scheme that fit the quarterback that he had. We've seen Lamar Jackson in situations where he's forced to pass the ball, like when he's playing in the playoffs, right? Forced to throw the ball, forced to be a thrower of the football, forced to be a quarterback, and not a runner. And he doesn't ever look very good. And we're seeing that again in that Baltimore offense with this prized new offensive coordinator that's going to run this more pro-style offense that's going to give Lamar Jackson the opportunity to be a thrower of the football. And Lamar Jackson looks uncomfortable operating in this system. And so my question is, and has been all season, is when do they start regretting giving him that money? Baker Mayfield looks like he's having a resurgence of his career. It's funny what happens when you have some talent around you that you can throw the ball to, right? Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, all those guys that he has down there, probably the best receiving core he's ever had in his entire career. So, I want to get into. We talked about Bill Belichick possibly getting fired at the end of the season. If I would have been able to do my show last week, another guarantee that you would have heard me say is that I guarantee that Washington beats Chicago and beats them handily. I was looking for that to be a get-right game for us. We got blown out by Buffalo, played a close game against Philadelphia that we should have won. And so I was looking at Chicago to be the get-right game at home, in a sellout crowd, on primetime TV, standalone game, everybody watching. It's time for us to show out. And as is impressed with Sam Howell as I have been this season, and impressed with Eric Bieniemy and his ability to adjust his play calling based on, one, what the offensive line can handle, and two, what Sam Howell can handle, and figuring out how to scheme that up to make it look good and be successful. He's done a good job at that for the most part this season. Our defense has been absolutely atrocious. Ron Rivera, during that Chicago game, stood on the sidelines and looked like a bump on the log. He looked disinterested, disengaged, and like he was somewhere he didn't belong. This is a man that's supposed to be coaching for his job, has not had a winning season yet this year. As a matter of fact, the only 3 winning seasons he's had as a head coach in the NFL were with Cam Newton. So, this vaunted defense that we've spent all of this money and all of this draft capital on is getting blown up every week in and week out. I hear fans screaming that they need to run the ball more. Well, you can't run the ball when you spot the other team 20 points. Chicago was up 27-3 at halftime. And even when we tried to make the comeback, the defense couldn't hold off the Bears offense long enough for us to complete the comeback. In my humble opinion, Ron Rivera should be fired immediately. Jack Del Rio should be fired immediately. Let's make Eric Bieniemy the interim head coach. See if he has what it takes to be a head coach in this league. Maybe he's our answer at head coach going forward. Try to find a young defensive mind that's on the coaching staff to be the defensive play caller, and see if somebody can get this defensive line that player, so everybody else plays off of how selfish he's playing. I'm not exactly sure what the problem is, but it seems like our defense is worse when Chase Young is in the lineup. And he's a super talented guy. I'm not taking anything away from Chase Young. It's just my opinion on my observation of how I watch this defense operate when he's in the game compared to when he's not in the game. I've had a lot of opportunities to see him not in the game. He's been hurt quite a bit. So I would almost be willing to trade Chase Young for a young, good offensive lineman, right? We've got plenty of holes on the offensive line. We could use some serious help on that side of the ball, on the line, in the trenches. And he would be good trade bait for somebody that needs a young pass rusher who is not playing badly, right? He's, I think, third or fourth in the league in quarterback pressures. I'm not sure how many sacks he's got, but, he's doing what he's supposed to do. It just seems like he messes up the chemistry of the rest of the defensive line when he's in there. Maybe it's because they're so used to playing without him. They do not know how to play with him. Maybe that's something that gets better as the season goes along. I'm not sure, but I know something's got to change there. There's a lot of fanfare and a lot of hype coming into the season with the new owners, and it just hasn't shown up on the field yet the way that we would have liked it to, especially with all the talent that's on this team. Got 2-star wideouts, really 3-star wideouts, because Chris Samuel's a beast too. So you've really got 3 great wideouts, a really good running back. Sam Howell looks like he could be a legit quarterback. We need way better play on the offensive line, and that defense has got to figure out how to stop somebody, because it's a horrible, horrible showing every year. For all the talent that's out there. So that's really some of my biggest takeaways so far this season. I will say that that Kansas City looks pedestrian. That's another takeaway that I've taken from this year is that Kansas City looks pedestrian. I know they're winning games and they're beating people, but as I've watched them, minus the Chicago game where they just manhandled Chicago, Kansas City just doesn't seem like the Kansas City, that we're used to seeing. So I don't know if it's the young nucleus of receivers that just haven't quite caught on yet. As the season goes, they get better. But I do look to keep an eye on Cincinnati as the season goes on and see what they look like, because it could really be a more wide open race in the AFC than what we're thinking it is. Cincinnati's down this year with the Joe Burrow injury. They don't look the same. Buffalo's got the injury problems in their defense. Miami looks on fire, minus their loss to Buffalo. But again, even with that loss to Buffalo, they still have to play them one more time, and Buffalo's defense is depleted. So I know at the beginning of the season, I really thought it was one of 3 teams in the AFC that was going to win it. It was either going to be Kansas City, Buffalo, or Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, unless Joe Burrow gets healthy and they get on fire, I don't see much coming out of there. This might be a lost year for them. Might be a lost year for Buffalo with all the injuries on the defense. And Kansas City looks beatable. Granted, they've only lost the one game, the season opener to Detroit, but they just haven't looked the same. They don't have that same edge that I'm used to seeing from Kansas City, where you just see that they're better than everybody else as soon as they step on the field. I have not seen that from them this year, other than the Chicago game. And so that's something that I think is worth watching going forward as the season progresses. So we're going to get into our picks. I only got 3 college games that I even really care to pick. The funny thing about college is I'm going to not pick some of these games because they look like they're just going to be massive blowouts, and then the game's going to be closer than what it should be. You had USC and Arizona last week went to, I want to say, triple overtime, right? And Arizona really almost won that game. So with that being said, some of these games that I'm just not picking because they look like they're going to be massive blowouts are probably going to be closer than what I think they're going to be. But when it comes to college, I really just try to focus on the games that are the biggest matchups. Georgia versus Vanderbilt, whether Vanderbilt keeps it close or not, that's not a game that anybody's interested in discussing. right? South Carolina and Florida, that's probably going to be a close game, but nobody cares about South Carolina and Florida right now. I don't know that anybody's really ever cared about South Carolina. They're not one of the teams that are usually very good. So, that being said, we'll get into the three games that I chose to discuss, which is Oregon and Washington. Honestly, when I looked at this, I was super surprised to find that Washington was a 3-point favorite in this game. I really thought that, now granted, Washington's been playing really good football, but so has Oregon. So it was really surprising to see that even at home, Washington's a 3-point favorite. And honestly, I like Oregon there. I've seen Oregon play a couple of times this year. Their defense is very physical, and their offense is very physical as well. So I think it'll be a close game, but I like Oregon to win this one. So I would take Oregon on the money line or Oregon +3. Next game you got is Miami at UNC. North Carolina's a 3.5-point favorite at home. I really kind of expected that number to be a little bit bigger. Miami's coming off of a heartbreaking loss where they should have knelt the ball and they ran it instead. But let's move past the fact that they lost the game because they didn't kneel the ball. They lost the game because they allowed Georgia Tech to beat them. Miami was like a 19.5-point favorite. Should have won that game going away. Probably should have won that game with their backups in it, and somehow managed to lose. I like what UNC's doing this year. They look like a different North Carolina team than years past, right? Drake May looks amazing. He's got his number one wideout's been cleared to play by the NCAA, so he's back on the field. So I like UNC to win this game, and I like them to cover. They're just on a different level this year than what they've been on in past years. And then the next one is USC at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to take USC here. I know USC plays zero defense and Notre Dame does, but Notre Dame's having a very disappointing season, and I wonder if they're going to be able to come back from the Louisville loss, right? They had the loss to Ohio State, which was a really emotional loss for them. And then they had a really close game against a really good Duke team. And then they come back against Louisville and a game they should have won. And they get beat, and teams that get on that big of an emotional roller coaster this early in the season, and it's been up and down and up and down, right? And it was just down. And I think it might stay down for this game, because this is going to be their fourth huge game back to back to back to back, right? And USC has a lights out offense. They are going to sling that thing around, and while they're going to let you score a lot of points, if they had college fantasy football, this would be the game to have all your players playing for one of the other teams. I just think that USC's going to be able to play against that emotion that Notre Dame has very well, because while it's a big game for USC's not had a lot of big games this year. Their probably biggest game so far was against Colorado. And while they're coming off of a close call, I think that they go into South Bend and take care of business. So on our pro picks, we'll start with Thursday nights, Denver at Kansas City. Kansas City's a 10.5-point favorite. While I usually like to stay away from divisional games, and I usually like to stay away from Thursday night games because they're just funky and weird, I will take Kansas City, and I will give away all the points that you want to take because Denver is a horrible team. Not talent-wise, It's funny that Sean Payton made all those comments about Nathaniel Hackett and his coaching in the offseason as he takes over for Nathaniel Hackett at Denver, and then they play the Jets, whose offensive coordinator is Nathaniel Hackett, and they get beat. Denver's just a bad football team. I don't know if they're poorly coached or they just don't care or what the case is, but for as much money as the Broncos owe Sean Payton, they might be willing to let that money go to get rid of him if he doesn't figure out how to turn things around really quick. So I'm going to take Kansas City, and I'll give you whatever points that you want to take, because I think Kansas City is just not that Kansas City's playing on their same level, but Denver's just a doormat right now, and they're going to get walked all over. Next, you've got Baltimore's a 4.5-point favorite at Tennessee. Tennessee plays really well at home. They play really well against Baltimore, and Baltimore's offense has been very stagnant. So I'm going to take Tennessee plus the 4.5. San Francisco -7 at Cleveland. I will take San Francisco. Deshaun Watson's probably not going to play again. They say he's day-to-day with a shoulder contusion. I honestly think he's tired of being in the limelight. You might have seen the last of Deshaun Watson. I think all the booze and the hatred and everything else that's coming his way has gotten to him, and maybe he just wants to go and live in a cabin somewhere. Would probably be a good idea for him. I wouldn't blame him. If all of those allegations are true as they seem to be, I would care less if I never saw him or heard his name again. But that being said, he's not playing. So I will take San Francisco -7. That's an easy pick. Next, you have Jacksonville -4 hosting the Indianapolis Colts. You got Gardner Minshew coming back to the team that drafted him and who he played very well for. And Indy plays Jacksonville very well. I think Jacksonville, kind of like week 1, squeaks out the win. Jonathan Taylor is coming back and is supposed to get a bigger workload this week than what he did last week. I like Indy plus the 4, Jacksonville to win, but I could be wrong there as well. Indy could very easily squeak this out. Though Jacksonville usually does play really well coming back from London, and they did win both their London games. If you remember last year, that's what sparked their late season revival was the London win, and they rattled off a bunch of wins in a row that got them in position to get into the playoffs. So this could be the same thing this year. But I'll take Indy plus the 4 in a close game. You got Carolina's at Miami. Miami's a 13.5-point favorite. I'll take Miami in 13.5 points, or give the 13.5 points away. Carolina's just not a good football team. They've got a long way to go to build that thing back up. It's going to be a slow process. They just don't have the talent. Offensive line's in shambles. They have no true number 1 wide receiver. They can't run the ball. So even though they have some good players on defense, their defense is on the field way too much. It's just not a help. Yeah, Washington is at Atlanta. Atlanta's a 2.5-point favorite. I don't know which way to go on this. If our defense plays the way that it's been playing, it's very easily we could get blown out by Atlanta. It wouldn't surprise me. Desmond Ridder is 5-0 at home, so he has not lost a home game yet. So this one's a coin toss. I'll definitely stay away from it. I don't ever bet on my own team. Too many emotions tied up in it. But if I had to pick it, I would take Atlanta -2.5. Washington's not shown me anything that says that even though they should beat Atlanta, that they will. Next, you got New Orleans is -1 at Houston. I will take Houston there. I like what CJ Stroud's doing. He looks like the most ready quarterback from the draft. He's calm, cool, and collected. He set a record this past weekend. I don't know if he threw an interception afterwards or not, but it at that point, I think it was 177 pass attempts without an interception or something like that. Whatever it was a record for a rookie quarterback for how long he's gone without throwing an interception. He looks legit. He looks like he might be the first legit quarterback to ever come out of Ohio State University. So hats off to C.J. Stroud for playing good rookie ball. Probably your offensive rookie of the year if he keeps it up. So I'll take Houston there. Seattle is at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's 3-point favorite at home. I'm going to take Seattle here. Until I know that Joe Burrow's 100% healthy, I'm not going to put any money with Cincinnati. They just haven't looked very good. The defense doesn't like to tackle, and Joe Burrow can't get the ball down the field without the use of his legs. And so until that calf's healed, I will take Seattle. Minnesota -2.5 at Chicago. I'm staying all the way away from this game. If I had to pick, I'd say that Minnesota probably wins it, but it's really a coin toss. They don't have Justin Jefferson. The Bears are coming off of a big win on Thursday night in prime time. And that's after having a big lead at Denver and blowing it. They were able to come back and get a big lead and hold on to it and secure a win. So they're running on an emotional high, so I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago goes in and upsets Minnesota. New England's at Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a 3-point favorite. I'm going to take Las Vegas and give up 3 points. New England's just a bad football team. If I'm Robert Kraft, I'm looking at a complete rebuild, right? Let's start over from scratch. Bill Belichick said something about needing to start over in his pregame or postgame speech, postgame press conference last Sunday, and I think Robert Kraft might be thinking the same thing. It's time for a reset. So give me Las Vegas -3. Arizona's at the Rams. The Rams are a 7-point favorite. Arizona's only won one game this year, but they've been in every game except for the 49ers game. Every other game has been a super close game. Rams probably win it, but I'm going to take Arizona plus the 7. And you got the Philadelphia Eagles -7 at the New York Jets. The Jets have been playing some inspired football the last couple of weeks. Kept it really close and probably should have won that game against the Chiefs. And then they did win the game against Denver. Philadelphia's offense has looked pretty defunct so far this season, so I'm going to take the Jets +7. You got Detroit -3 at Tampa Bay. I will take Detroit. They're just on a different level this year. Sunday night, you've got the Giants at the Bills. The Bills are a 14-point favorite. I'm going to take that just because the Giants have been a bad football team. I know I've talked about Buffalo's defense being depleted and all of that, but Daniel Jones has looked horrible. I think Vanderbilt could probably beat the Giants right now. Not really, but that's just how bad they've played. And then Monday night, you've got Dallas is -2 at the Chargers. Give me the Chargers. I think Dallas is starting to realize their limitations, and that drudging that San Francisco gave them is going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. And not the kind of bad taste that makes them come out and play inspired. I think it really derailed them. It's going to get to them mentally because they just cannot seem to beat good teams. And not that the Chargers are an overly good team. As a matter of fact, they're a really poorly coached team. Brandon Staley's a clown show. But that being said, I just think that mentally that drudging that San Francisco gave Dallas is going to stick with them for a little bit. They're going to play off for a couple of weeks. So give me the Chargers plus the 2 points. And that is our weekly picks. So I thank you for being here and joining me on this show. If you liked what you heard, like, subscribe, comment, share. If you didn't like what you heard, like, subscribe, comment, and share, especially if you didn't like it. I love to debate sports and tell you why my point is the right point. So that being said, we'll see you next week. Thank you.